The story begins when one of the squad is given a mission: the extermination of Kunterna, a demonic dragon who disrupted the world order, great warriors who gathered from different worlds and dimensions. Namely Hania, Jamil, Gador, Zephyr, and the leader of all this company, the hero of those hard times. And also Arin's only close friend, a guy named Elkinus. He led everyone to the lowest levels of the demonic cave, and just as he was about to deliver a decisive blow to the demon dragon, Arin felt dragon breath in front of him. The girl figured she didn't have time to give birth, so she quickly pushed Al away, and in its ability absorbed the sphere of breath. Breath is a poisonous gas that exists in the form of small spheres before changing to a gaseous state. This means that at that moment it is possible to defend against it with the slightest loss. That is, it is possible to save all lives by sacrificing only one person. Namely, sacrificed Arin. At that moment, the girl thought of nothing. To save them all. As she fell exhausted, she asked her partners if the dragon was dead. Jamil got very angry and said that naturally, but she didn't understand why Arin just silently sacrificed herself. Arin said that even if it had saved them, there was no time to put up a shield. But the girl wouldn't stop. She said they should have died together. They had promised each other that if they were to die, they would die together. Why would she do that? The girl told her not to cry, but she could hardly see anything anymore and realized that apparently the poison had already affected her vision. A little earlier, Arin had seen the guys' faces very clearly, but now she couldn't see anything at all. The girl thought maybe the sensitivity was gone. She didn't feel any pain, but then she realized that it would be even better. Then she turned to Al and asked why he was the one who wasn't a match. She asked him to come over because she wanted to look at him. "You have to take one last look at a pretty face, don't you?" Arin said she was in a great mood. She had always wondered how people felt at the moment of death. She had never thought it would be so easy and joyful. Afterwards, she said that they should all live a good life. That was the end that stayed in her memory. But the very next moment, Arin opens her eyes and realizes that she's found herself on soft grass. The girl immediately started to feel herself. She couldn't believe she was still awake. Arin remembered that she had definitely fought a demonic dragon with a Kunter dragon. At that moment, the girl remembered that during that battle she had died. Arin, sitting on the grass, didn't realize what was going on at all. The girl doesn't know where she is or what this place is, but she can clearly feel the energy of the spirits. Arin looked forward and saw that it was the world tree saying it out loud. She heard another voice say it was right. The girl turned and saw a man in front of her. It was the dragon, Lord Zephyr. He looked at her and said they hadn't seen each other in a while, calling her a warlock. Arin was surprised and asked why it was a long time ago. Marshmallow replied that it had been so 80 years since then. The girl was very surprised to hear this. Zephyr saw the look on her face and asked if that meant the experiment was a success. Arin was stunned. She didn't know what he was talking about. After that, they went to their base, Arin thought. Considering what must be an 80-year-old dragon's nest abandoned for 80 years, she noticed that it was pretty clean and cozy, as if people lived in it. As they entered the building, the girl realized that Zephyr still had unfinished business in this world, which was why he was beside her now. Then she asked that Zephyr explain to her what was going on and how it had happened. The man, giving her a glass, said that he had hidden her soul in secret from everyone as soon as she died. Seeing her frightened face, he said that a spiritual orb appeared from her mouth. Her soul was so happy and was preparing to go to the world of the dead. He said that's why he took her. Arin got angry and asked, "Who the hell is he to go against the laws of nature anyway?" Zephyr said he only wanted to help her soul find peace under the world tree that the dragons protect, because she, of all people, deserved it. Arin was the only person whom the spirits showered with love. At that moment, the girl thought that even though she was a spirit caster, that fact did not give her the right to rest in a place like this. Which meant that Zephyr, being the protector of the world tree, had violated countless of his duties to bring the girl to this place. Then she thanked him and asked him, but how did she stay alive after all? Zephyr, reaching for a drink, agreed and said it was really strange. The world tree demanded his blood. At that moment, he thought that was the price for her resting in this place, so he gave it to her. But the tree began to create a sphere from the branches and leaves of its crown. Then it enclosed Arin's soul in its embrace, as if it were going to revive her. After a while, a body began to form, and after 80 years, she was eventually born. The girl was shocked. Zephyr said that she had changed a lot from her past self, then gave her a mirror to look at herself. Arin looked at herself in the mirror and was amazed. She thought that she was beautifully reborn, but she found it hard to believe what she saw in front of her. Zephyr continued to speak. He asked if he and the World Tree could call it a joint experiment. After all, they had created this body together, and the experiment had been a success. Zephyr thought for a moment and said that in people's minds he was her daddy, but the World Tree, it turns out, was mommy. He said that if the girl wanted to, she could call him daddy. It was clear by the look on Arin's face that she wasn't very happy with that suggestion. Zephyr changed the subject and said that he would tell her briefly what had happened in the meantime. Arin agreed and said it would be great. She approves the item with brevity. Then Zephyr said he should start with the warrior Elkinas. He paused for a moment and said that he had gone mad. Arin choked when she heard that. Elkinas Pontiac being the scion of a family that belonged to a side branch of the imperial family, and taking possession after slaying a demonic dragon of his heart. He rose to the level of a demigod and was given eternal life. Arin, listening to him, said that this was good, but why did he say that he had gone mad? Zephyr said it was all because Elkinas had taken the Kunterna egg and was now taking care of it. Arin, hearing this, was very surprised. She asked, "Did he really take the egg of the demonic dragon, Kuterna, the one who was their enemy?" Zephyr said he did. Then the girl asked, "And why didn't anyone stop him?" The boy replied that all his battle comrades, including him, were against it, but Elkinas didn't listen to their arguments. All the living things talked him out of it. They asked the guy to get rid of the demonic creature's egg. Arin asked, "Didn't those entreaties do any good?" Zephyr sighed and said she was calling out a few deaths that were in her memory. When Duke Pontiac began to put pressure on him, taking advantage of the family's power, Elkinas killed the Duke and quietly became head of the family. And the 6th squad of knights sent as a warning by the Denbane Empire, Elkin's homeland, had been completely annihilated. Arin understood how this could happen. What would he even need an egg for? Why on earth would he be raising this dragon? The girl doesn't understand why on earth he does these things and even speaks out against everyone. Zephyr replied that he was guessing the reason. He thought it was all because of Kunterna's ability to transcend time and space. Elkins wants to go back in time and change things. Arin got more than a little pissed off and pounded her fist on the table and asked, "Has he lost his mind?" She doesn't understand. Why go back to that time when it's relatively peaceful now? What does he want to change there anyway? Zephyr was silent for a moment, then added that it could be, like her death. Arin was skeptical of that assumption and told him not to talk nonsense because it didn't make any sense. Zephyr asked why it didn't make any sense. The girl replied that everyone is preparing to die, so there was nothing to be done about it. Even a child could understand that. They swore an oath before they set out, to sacrifice their lives if necessary. But she still doesn't understand. Why did she think of Jamil at that moment? It's her good friend, the thief with the biggest ego in the world, and also Elkins's lover. At this point, the girl asked, "What about Jamil?" Zephyr interjected, "Does she mean Jamil, the queen of the thieves' world?" Without waiting for an answer, he said that the girl had passed away after devoting her life to running a criminal organization, and he asked again, why would she want to know about that? Arin was surprised and asked, "What does why mean?" After all, Elkinas would definitely listen to her words. "You liked her and Jamil for each other, didn't you?" The girl asked if they hadn't gotten married. Zephyr replied indifferently that there was no wedding. Arin couldn't believe they'd broken up, but it was clear to her now, if Elkinas was doing this sort of thing in front of her, even she'd throw it away. She asked, "Where is it seen that a man who is called a great warrior would raise the offspring of a demonic dragon?" But Zephyr didn't say anything to her but just looked at her. Then Arin asked, "What is that look in his eyes?" Zephyr said that it was just that Elkinas must have been unlucky initially, but let her continue. Arin was surprised and asked if Jamil and Elkinas had ever met. The guy said that, like he said, nothing happened between them. Even he doesn't know about it. What do you mean she doesn't know? Arin said they had such a good relationship. The two of them disappeared every night to practice. Zephyr said indifferently that it was just training, nothing more. Arin said that Elkinas wasn't even afraid to trust her with his protection after all. The boy said he would have let her if she had asked for it. Arin said he would have trusted her with his life too. The girl said they were also always whispering about something in private, and every time Elkines's face would just flame up. Zephyr felt somehow uncomfortable. He told the enchantress that he could no longer tell the reason for this, and turned away from her. When the girl asked why, he replied that Elkines should already tell Elkines himself about that. When Arin first saw Elkines, he was the shortest boy in their village. Her mother was an herbalist, and every time she went shopping with her, the girl saw this child being beaten up. One day she decided to chase the bullies away and help him. Arin pretended to call the knight and told him to come here quickly. The hooligans, when they heard this, said they had to run away immediately, or they would be caught. The girl walked over to Elkines and said they were very lucky to believe it, then held out her hand to the boy and asked him if he was hurt badly, if he would let her take a look. Arin healed him with herbs and took him to the forest where she introduced him to spirits that only she could see. That's how Elkines became her best friend. They went everywhere holding each other's hands. Arin was never lonely. Then one day Elkines suddenly disappeared. Rumor has it he was a descendant of Duke Pontiac. The next time they met was 12 years later, the year after her mother died. That year she was 22. She was outside minding her own business when suddenly Elkines came up to her, took off his hood, and apologized to her for being late. The guy said he wanted to come much earlier, but he had things to do. He told her how he was trying his best to get the family recognized. However, the Pontiac family not only did not recognize him, but also tried to limit him in everything, so he had no chance to return. When he came to her, Arin asked if that meant he could stay with her. But the guy said no, and he'd have to leave again, because Elkines had been ordered to capture a dragon in the Denbane Empire. The girl was surprised and asked him what he said about that demonic dragon Kuntern. She couldn't believe he wanted to do it alone. Elkines said that's why he came to see her someday. He'll come back again and be sure to stay alive. But before he could finish the last sentence, Arin interrupted him and said that she would go with him. She was a spellcaster, if he remembered. Before her mother left this world, she told the girl of her extraordinary abilities. The guy came up to her and said he couldn't put her in danger. Let her just wait for him in a safe place. Arin wondered what he was even talking about. Even if she stayed, it wouldn't guarantee her safety at all. The girl said more importantly, how on earth could she leave him alone in a situation like this? And she said they would go together, stepping closer to him. Arin says that she has never had a friend in her entire life but him. She can't let go of Elhians when they first meet after all these years. The boy tried to say something, but the girl immediately interrupted him and said that there was no way she would be a burden to him. The boy tried to say something, but the girl interrupted him at once and said that she would never be a burden to him. Elhans, when he heard this, said quietly that he simply had no words. Then he took her hand and said, "Okay." Afterward, the guy got down on his knee and said that of everyone he knows, she is the kindest and bravest person, his one and only friend. He said that they would live this life hand in hand and meet death together. He then asked her if she agreed to this, and when their journey came to an end, they would surely stay together to the end. Then the man kissed her hand. Arin, when she told Zephyr about all of this, she didn't understand what this was even about. How could he do such a thing? The guy himself, when the story was over, said he thought his ears were going to bleed if he ever heard that again. Arin ignored his words and said that how could the kindest child become the common enemy of the entire continent in an instant? She was referring to Elkines, of course. Zephyr says he's become an enemy, but not of the entire continent, of course. And by the way, she keeps going on and on about his kindness. Except his character doesn't match her description of him. With the exception of Arin, Elkines acted just plain nasty to everyone. The girl got angry and told him not to say anything bad about their Elkinas. Arin said that he observed etiquette and kneeled even to a low-born girl like her. Elkines is not at all what Zephyr thinks he is. The guy said he had something to add about that part. Zephyr asked the girl, how could it be taken as an offer of cooperation? He just doesn't have the words. Do spellcasters always have the same wind in their heads? Arin thought he was as sharp-tongued as ever. And then she asked, what about Hania and Gador? Zephyr said that Hania became the head of the Church of Altima and passed away at the age of 97. God had shown her special love, so now she had probably become an angel or a low-ranking god. Gador, however, could not change Elkines' mind and returned to his homeland, taking his place as tribal chief. Arin thought, hearing this, that this was not bad after all, and that everyone but Elkines was all right. Well, here all of a sudden the girl was upset again. She shouldn't be happy about it. She should be worried about Elkinus. Zephyr thought she was up to her old tricks again. When the girl had calmed down a little from her tantrum, she took the glass again and drank, asking, "Well, what is this anyway? How is this possible?" Zephyr said, telling the enchantress to stop drinking already. But after finishing the contents of her cup, she said that she had made up her mind, and she would go herself to Elkinus personally. She'll come and tell him she's back to life and talk him out of that stupid egg thing. Let Elkinus take good care of him, but if there's even a small chance of a Kuntern-like animal, that Arn is going to get rid of him personally, because we can't let that tragedy happen again. Zephyr asked, "Does the enchantress really think Elkinus will believe her right away?" The girl was surprised and said that of course she would believe him. She was his only friend. He would recognize her at first sight. Zephyr answered her that apparently she still didn't understand yet. "Arn," she asked, "did you say something wrong?" But he replied that it was fine. It would be better to experience it for yourself. Then he, getting up from the table, said that he would go with her. Her human body is an important specimen with the noble dragon blood used as a base, and Elkinus would not be able to mindlessly chop him up. The girl was surprised and asked what he meant by that. Zephyr replied that the appearance changes. Since he had not announced the end of the transformation, he could change his appearance as much as he wanted. Arn now realized why Zephyr's appearance was still the same as it was. Transformation is a technique that dragons use to stay in the human world. There are laws specifically for them that deal with this skill. After one transformation, dragons must either take a break for 1,000 years or abort the transformation, and when the spell is used again, take its former form. Zephyr agreed with her that it was against the rules, but this time the transformation is simply necessary for him to fulfill the great mission. The decision is made according to his personal assessment of the situation and the Dragon Lord's assessment. Arn asked Zephyr if he didn't think that such an interpretation only benefited one, but he ignored her question and hesitated, so he wouldn't be too conspicuous. It would probably be better to be an earl. Then he asked the enchantress what title she liked. Arn was surprised and asked if she was going to be an aristocrat too. Zephyr replied naturally and asked, "I am the enchantress Arn, who died during a battle with the demonic dragon queen years ago." Is this really the kind of welcome speech she had planned for her appearance in her new guise? Arn thought about the word aristocrat and said that she had, in truth, always wanted to be a noblewoman here. A tea ceremony with a beautiful tea service, a ballroom and all that. Zephyr replied to the enchantress that she was already a noblewoman. The girl was surprised and asked how that was possible. Guy explained that all the members of the squad were given titles. In her case, due to her honorable death, she was posthumously glorified as a state mage of the empire. Arn was very surprised at how she was counted among the capital aristocracy. And Dali is one of the highest titles that allows one to take part in the management of the magic tower. She was in shock. The girl couldn't believe it, Zephyr replied that it was understandable that she wasn't aware of it. It would be nice to visit her grave when they came down. However, they should first opt for Count Imtern. He is raising a daughter. He has an estate in the countryside, has never visited the capital, but has enough money to put his family name on the list of nobility. So this option is perfect for them. Arn thought for a moment and asked, "He says he has a daughter. That doesn't mean she's going to be—" But at that moment, she broke off before she could finish the sentence. The girl looked at Zephyr's face, which had already changed appearance. He had become older and more haggard. The boy asked, "How is it? Does he look like him?" Arn replied that aristocrats were easily seduced, but then she realized that was silly, and replied that she meant to say that everyone would like him. Zephyr was fine with that option. He then said that for the current purpose of his transformation, it was very important for them to be kind and friendly. Arn asked, "What is the purpose of his transformation?" Zephyr replied that he should play the role of a father who has brought his daughter, who dreams of a noble lifestyle and balls, to the capital. Afterward, when it was already dark, Arn returned to the tree she had woken up near. She said hello to it. Afterward, she said that she had heard that he had brought her back to life. The girl asked if there was a special reason. Perhaps there is something she needs to do, or perhaps the tree itself desires something. Arn doesn't know what it could be. However, she will try to live this life with her best efforts. Then she asked the tree if she could return to this place again when she said goodbye to her life. Arn asked if it would let her stay with the world tree. But at that moment, the girl was drawn somewhere. She felt her body stop obeying her. Arn gave in to this force. She walked over to the pillar and hugged it. At that moment, the girl realized that this world tree was giving an answer using her body, asking her not to worry. After all, she would have the opportunity to fall asleep in its embrace. As she left the tree that morning, she said goodbye and said they would see each other again. At that moment, Zephyr came up to her and asked what she had been doing in the forest all night. Arn explained that she had been saying goodbye to the world tree. Then she turned to the lad and said that the world tree had given her a twig in her hands. She said it showered her with leaves and particles of light. Zephyr replied to the enchantress that she was indeed loved, and asked if she knew what could be done with those leaves. Arn replied that absolutely. They would protect her from bad people, help her contract with more powerful spirits due to her enhanced magic, and also, if she auctioned off even one leaf, she would become fabulously rich. Zephyr didn't understand, and why the world tree liked it so much. This is a crazy idea, he thought. After that, he turned around and took her hand, telling her that they should get going. Let her walk faster and hold the hem. They had a lot to do on the first day after the transformation. In that instant, Zephyr snapped his fingers, and they were already instead of the forest on some street in the city. Aaron said he scared her and asked where they were. Zephyr replied that they were in an alley, and told her to just follow him. As they walked, the girl looked around and realized that this was the richest city of the second most important in the Debane Empire. Archduke Elkin's Pontiac's possession is a town called Irene. Arn was surprised and asked, "Is life really that fast in the second most important city?" Zephyr replied that it had changed a lot from the past. When the city came under the rule of Elkinas, the name was changed to Iran, and the city itself grew considerably in size. Preparations for the festival were in full swing, so the center was even busier. Arn looked around and noticed that everyone was really bustling around. When she asked what the festival was about, what was being celebrated, Zephyr said it would be a special event in Irene, a festival to honor the day the dragon was destroyed. Arn asked, "Is it really true?" But then suddenly, as they passed by some shop, the vendor shouted for them to try the dragon shish kebab. They used fresh kunturna meat. The girl was surprised and asked if it was really dragon meat, but Zephyr said it was all a hoax, and there was just regular chicken. But Arn bought this appetizer anyway and said it turns out the day they killed the kunturna was declared a dragon-slaying holiday. Zephyr said that once a year the whole empire gets awfully rowdy, and among all these places, it is in Irene that they celebrate with the most fanfare. He then pointed to the statue they approached, and said that this was the heart of the city, the main square of Iron. Zephyr explained that that statue was considered the pride and symbol of the city. He then asked if it reminded her of anyone. "Let her take a closer look," he added. Arn looked up and said that she seemed to know her too. Zephyr, barely holding back a laugh, said he probably did. Arn hesitated even more. She looked at the cloak and the oak staff. The girl thought it all looked so familiar. The things looked like the ones she had used. Then she froze in horror and asked Zephyr what it was she had done there. The girl asked why her monument was there, and then wondered about the name of the city, Iron, which sounded like Arn. Zephyr smiled and said that was right. The city was named after her. She became the one who was immensely missed by the whole empire. Her wanderings together with her comrades in arms are dedicated to plays and chants, and spellcasters and naturalists consider Irene almost a sacred place. Arn's oak staff is kept in the Archduchess and is displayed once a year around this time. Everyone adores it and mourns its loss greatly. Zephyr said that if she was lucky, it would be her return after 80 years. Arn was surprised and asked, "What do you mean if one gets lucky? Could it really be unlucky?" But the guy didn't say anything. He just kept silent, and they walked on. After a while, they entered Alera's atelier, and they were immediately greeted by the entire staff. The girl who decided to serve them asked how she could help. Zephyr said they needed several sets of clothes, which could be made in the shortest possible time, from their catalog. The woman said okay, they'll match it to their budget. Zephyr said it was so exciting it was even funny. It is most profitable to be in the shadow cast by the powerful of this world, so they are bound to enjoy it. Arn, hearing all this, thought that his temper must have deteriorated even more. After a while, she was made to try on a lot of outfits, and after one she couldn't stand it anymore and shouted that she couldn't take it anymore. Zephyr, who was sitting there watching all this, asked, "Is she really tired already? Besides, he helped her at all. She doesn't have any willpower at all." Aaron got angry and asked, "What do you mean he helped her?" Because his disgusting sense of style only made the fitting take even longer. Zephyr told the sorceress that he was sorry she had no sense of beauty at all. That's when that saleswoman came in. When she saw the girl, she said that the dress suited her so well. Aaron looked away from her argument and asked, "Does this really suit her?" The saleswoman said that Aaron was fine with both the design and the color palette. Zephyr said in that case, they would take it. He then turned to the girl and said that someone was very excited about going to Elkinus. "And you seemed so indifferent." Aaron said that she wasn't outright worried. It was just that this was the first time they would be meeting in a long time. That's all. Then she asked him if they would go to Pontiac Manor at once. Zephyr was surprised at this strange question, but replied that of course they would go at once. At that moment, Aaron saw some flying writing and thought maybe it was a snippet. It's kind of a common way for dragons to send information. On hikes, the girl had often watched Zephyr use it. When Aaron saw the troubled face of the man who read the letter, she asked, "Is something wrong? Maybe?" Zephyr said it was a snippet with a message from an aide he had sent to the palace. At that moment he snapped his fingers. Aaron realized that he had cast silence magic on the entire room. She wondered what it said if no one but them was supposed to hear it. Zephyr interrupted her thoughts and said that there were two pieces of news: bad news and completely useless news. He then asked the enchantress which one to start with. Aaron hesitated, then told him to start with the useless one. Zephyr replied that it was an excellent choice. The Empire was currently hosting a crimson dragon, who had also, like him, changed his appearance. The first change of appearance in 1,500 years of active life. The starting point was the Empire 3 years ago. He was also informed that the reports that dragons going through a makeover for the first time should send in periodically had suddenly stopped going through. Zephyr said he wants us to find him before he makes a mess because he's a pain in the ass. And the bad news is, he asked as the enchantress ripped off the Wenculus carefully and swallowed it. Aaron was surprised and asked, "Is there more of this? Why?" Zephyr said that from the looks of it, getting back from the Archduke's estate wouldn't be easy. When the girl took a leaf and ate it, the guy said they could then move out to their finally mad old friend. After that, they got into the carriage and drove off. After a while, Aaron looked out the window and noticed that they were passing through a forest. But in the very next moment, they were already near the duchy, having come out of the protective barrier. The girl was surprised and said that they had just been in the forest. How so? Zephyr explained that it was a protective barrier, the very first fortification Elkinus had made after he became head of the clan. It separates the town from the estate. Zephyr said that all sorts of rabble, like them, could walk around the archduchy during the festival. As they began to pull up, the boy asked the enchantress if she had lived the leaf well. Aaron replied that yes, very thoroughly. He replied that she did well and let her eat another one just in case, because they were already there. After that, Zephyr came out first and helped the lady down. Aaron was shocked when she saw the manor. She said that the entire roof was the color of celadon. It's even more luxurious than the imperial palace. Zephyr said that everything was correct. And in fact, the Pontiac clan was much more powerful than the imperial family. Now it was clear to the girl where Elkinus had grown up. But at that moment a man came out to them, and said that they must have been tired on the road, and expressed his joy at being able to welcome them to the estate. Zephyr was surprised to see him. He asked the girl in a whisper, "Is this old man still alive?" Aaron replied by asking him who he was anyway. Zephyr said it was a half-elf. He must be well over 200. You have to be careful with this serpent because his soul is blacker than darkness. The man came closer to them and said that's right. He's a half-elf. But it was a bit of a shame because his soul was not black at all. Then he said that he was glad to meet the noblest of beings. Zephyr was surprised and asked, how would he know what he was, a half-elf? He said that in his entire life he had only met one living creature that called him a serpent with a soul blacker than darkness. Besides, the lady standing next to him seems worth including among the noble ones as well. Aaron was surprised to hear that. Then the girl bowed, saying hello to him. The man bowed back and said that he welcomed her. His name was Carlot, and he was the manager of the Pontiac family. Zephyr asked where the warrior, that is the Archduke, was. Carlot said that His Highness was at the manor, but due to the meeting they were having, they would not be able to see each other today. Considering that the guests of the manor were such noble creatures, they might as well stay inside. But Zephyr answered him not to worry, and bring them to him because he was well aware of what was happening. He also said that he takes responsibility for whatever happens next. Carlot replied that he would trust his words, so he told them to follow him. He would escort them to the Archduke after all. After that, they walked into the manor. Zephyr turned to the sorceress and said there was something he hadn't told her yet. When the girl asked what he meant, Zephyr replied that she knew the warrior had enough wealth and power to rival the imperial family. It would be preferable to destroy the man who threatens the authority of the imperial family, except the enemy is an immortal hero. Since assassination was impossible, the imperial family changed their position and, in order to manipulate the warrior, proposed a political marriage. The answer was an unconditional refusal, and then he took possession of the Kuntern's egg, and whether it was the head of the clan, even the imperial knights, whoever opposed him, death awaited them all. Anyway, the imperial family had done something stupid, which was what it all started to come down to. But then, all of a sudden, Karloth said that they had arrived. Zephyr then told the girl that she would see right away which one it was. Arin had no way of knowing what stupidity meant, but when she entered the room, she immediately saw Elkinus in front of her. It had been a long time since they had seen each other. The girl noticed that he was a little thin, but he hadn't changed at all since the last time they'd seen each other. But then suddenly, who? The girl looked to the side and noticed people sitting on the couch, and she thought, maybe they are, and the guests who arrived before them. But then suddenly Elkinus himself spoke. He turned to the girl and called her Arin. Afterwards he said to her, "Thank you so much for bringing the girl back alive." Arin, the real one. She looked at the girl sitting next to her and didn't understand why Elkins had addressed her specifically. But then she took a closer look and realized that this girl looked a lot like the old her. Elkins said that if she didn't mind, could he ask her to tell him about the day they decided to get rid of the Kuntern? The girl replied that of course she could do that. Then he asked what she was doing. The girl replied that she had been tearing wormwood on the hill. Elkins asked, "And what did he say when he saw her?" The girl replied that he had called her by the name of Arin, who was watching all this, not realizing how she knew about it. Elkins asked, "And what happened after that?" The girl said he told her of the hardships he had endured at Pontiac Manor, and then she felt sorry and the girl cried. The real Arin, who was standing next to her, thought that this never happened. It's all a hoax. Upon hearing, Elkins thanked Arin for sharing her point of view. Memories of those days flooded back into his mind. But, he said, except that her answers were too different from those memories. The girl got really scared about it, said it couldn't happen, it was then, so she forgot a bit. But at that moment, Elkins drew his sword and said that the exam had failed. The cursed imperial family had lost their conscience. The year before last, the memoirs of Jamil had been discovered, and everyone was saying something similar. Elkins didn't understand where they found such fools. The girl fell to her knees. She turned to His Highness and asked for forgiveness and begged for mercy. The girl said that she did not want to deceive him, let him believe her, for it was the pure truth. The girl begged him not to kill her. Elkins looked at her carefully, then said naturally no. After that, he put his sword to her throat and said that she didn't look one bit like Arin, not at all. Elkins asked that the girl simply tell the imperial family that they had failed. Now let her disappear from his sight. The girl, walking backwards, thanked him for letting her live. Then she left. Arin, who had been watching the whole time, didn't understand what had happened, but then she thought that this was probably the stupidity that the Denbane imperial family had done towards Elkinus. They presented to him who pretended to be the real Arin. The man had to face the fake time after time. Elkinaz rejected the false image right in front of him again and again. Now the girl realized what Zephyr meant when he said Elkinaz had gone mad. If something like this has been repeated for decades, it is simply impossible to stay sane. But at that moment, Elkinaz started to change his shirt. The girl immediately turned away and thought she had come for business, not to admire naked bodies. But suddenly Elkinaz turned to Carlot and asked, who were those people standing behind him? He had said that he would not receive anyone today. Carlot apologized to him, but said that the guests who had arrived wished to meet him. Elkind said that if they were guests for whom he had disobeyed, they must be from the squad. Then the boy asked, and to whom this unfamiliar face belonged. He began to enumerate. Hania and Jamil were dead. His favorite friend he had kicked out a little earlier. Gedor said that he would never set eyes on Elkinas again in his life. Then the only thing left to do was, but the man didn't finish the sentence. Elkinas sprang from his seat and ran straight at Zephyr. He grabbed him by the collar and asked him what burrow such a pitiful lizard had crawled out of. The guy said he's been looking for him for a long time. Now he should give clear answers to all questions if he doesn't want to die. Elkin said that before she died, Hanaya had said something interesting during her confession, namely about the spiritual realm. Aaron, when he asked where Zephyr had taken her, Elkinas in an angry voice told the boy not to even think about lying to him. Aaron thought for a moment that Zephyr had told her that he had taken the spirit orb in secret from everyone. It turns out that Hanaya had noticed him, but it didn't surprise her. A cleric of the highest rank simply couldn't help but notice a soul, and that was exactly what Hanaya was. Elkind told the boy to tell soon or he would kill him. Zephyr said defiantly for him to try to do that. Elkind was surprised and asked if he thought he couldn't do it. Aaron, who was standing nearby, thought that this murderous aura could be felt even from afar. The girl thought that this man was quite different from the Elkinas she had known all her life. He was a completely different person now. Aaron had hoped that he lived happily in a peaceful world where the demon dragon and his kind didn't exist. But the girl was wrong. Elkins continued to get angry and told the guy to tell him soon what he had done to Aaron's spirit realm. Zephyr said that her body had been purified by immersion in the holy spring, but it was impossible to revive the enchantress. Elkins said it was all about taking that damn spirit orb. Zephyr smirked and wondered if he'd been looking hard enough, since the girl could have just been right in front of him. At that moment the man turned and looked at the girl who was standing nearby. Aaron wondered if he would recognize her. She really wanted him to. The one with whom he shared joys as well as sorrows, the friend with whom they did everything together. Elkinas looked at the girl briefly. After that she snorted and said that Zephyr was even more shameless than the Denbanes. At least they bothered with that similar appearance. Since even that was beyond him, Elkinas said he could at least bring a brave child who knew how to hide his trembling. Aaron understood that he feared her. From her mother she certainly knew that. But when in reality Elkinas failed to recognize her, only stared at her with an icy stare, her heart began to squeeze with pain. Aaron couldn't contain her feelings and cried. She hated her resentment, Elkinas's coldness, and the situation itself. She hated everything. But suddenly her thoughts were interrupted by Elkinas's voice, who noticed that she was crying. He asked her what had upset her so much that she was crying. But then suddenly he started walking towards her and said that just like that snake said, she might be Aaron. Judging by the traces of white magic, she's a spellcaster as well as a real girl. And the outward differences could easily be justified by the fact that the girl had gotten a new body from the world tree. Elkin said she must have worked out every detail if Zephyr had brought her. But then, as if asking himself how he could best test her, and he called her Aaron after all. At that moment, the girl thought he saw her as just a new test subject. She really is the real Aaron he's been looking for, except she doesn't have the confidence to match the girl his imagination has created. Aaron thought that enjoying the exam would definitely kill her, just like the numerous girls he'd met before. Then after thinking it over, she blurted out that she wasn't Aaron. Elkinas clearly didn't expect such a turn. He was very surprised and asked what she meant by that. Aaron said that she didn't know who this girl was, and she was telling him that she wasn't Aaron at all. At that moment she thought maybe her words sounded a little disrespectful, but after remaining silent for a bit, Elkins asked once more, "So she's definitely not Aaron?" The girl said that yes, she didn't even know who the girl was, and she really wasn't Aaron by any means. At this point she was hoping to make him believe she wasn't her. Elkins didn't understand what was going on. He asked then who she was. Aaron, thinking her answer over, said that she was Zephyr's daughter. The boy was surprised and asked if she meant to say that he had met a couple and had cubs. Then who was his partner? Aaron was a little confused, but then remembered Zephyr's words that in people's minds, he was her daddy and the world tree was her mommy. Then the girl said she was in the woods. But now it was like she was a vegetable. Zephyr was shocked. He didn't understand how the enchantress could say such a thing about the noble and powerful world tree. Elkins didn't understand and asked what it meant. Aaron said that it was a little difficult to explain in detail, as it only applied to family members. Then the guy said, so be it. That lowly lizard might have reasons not to talk about it too. Then he asked, and why did she, during her first transformation, come to this very place? Aaron would really like to tell Elkins that she came to protect him because she heard he was in danger. But she couldn't say so, of course. So she answered that her father had told her to look at the newly hatched cub. Elkins was surprised and asked why it was that he had been excluded from the dragon book in the first place. So it had nothing to do with them. Aaron was about to say something, but Zephyr interrupted her and said that and yet he was a child of Kunturna, and they should monitor the possibility of him turning into something like that. Zephyr asked if it was really a dragon. He said that if it was actually a normal baby dragon, its first words after hatching would be, "You're not my mother. What are you? You're a pathetic little human being." And why he would have decided to run away from it. He said that if that was the case, the sylphs would have informed him right away. Aaron thought at that moment that it was a good thing Zephyr had recovered so quickly while she was stalling. He said he wouldn't take the Elkins child, but they could tell him what the problem was, and it would be advantageous to show it to them. Elkins was silent for a moment, then said okay and motioned for them to follow him. As they walked down the hallway, Aaron was surprised that it was so far away. She wondered if maybe the cub was so big that it wasn't kept in the main building, but in an annex. After a while they approached the room, and Elkins said they had arrived. The cub was in the cradle so they could examine. As the girl walked in, she thought the room looked quieter and cozier than she had imagined. Even with the lights on, she felt disgusted and anxious. The girl looked at the others who were walking with her, and thought that they must be feeling the same way because of their proximity to the source. Its sinister energy comes from the baby Kunturna, the reason Elkins has been branded insane, and also what makes him stand up to the world. Aaron thought that she would destroy the culprit of all this with her own hands. But when she approached the cradle, it surprised her very much, because a baby's hand came out of it. Then the girl looked inside and saw a child there, a real and live baby. Afterward, the baby, seeing Elkins, climbed up in his crib and started asking for his arms. Aaron asked the man if she could hold him in her arms, but he said he didn't care at all. After that, the girl walked over and took the baby in her arms. When she smelled it, she thought that this baby smelled so nice. But then suddenly she realized that perhaps it was the source of the dark energy. But it couldn't be so, for only light energy could be sensed from it. Aaron didn't understand how she could sense dark energy. Suddenly Zephyr spoke up and asked the warrior if it was true that this child had hatched from an egg 10 years ago. Elkins replied that it was true, though he had not announced it anywhere. There can be no doubt. Zephyr thought for a moment and said that it was simply impossible, and this child was definitely not a dragon. Elkins was surprised and asked why it wasn't a dragon, how he could be so sure, but Zephyr said that a dragon cub wasn't born in human form. Once born, the dragon resembles a small lizard with wings developing rapidly. He goes to find a new place after 5 months and starts living on his own. Aaron was surprised and asked then who the child was, if not a dragon. Everyone hesitated, and Zephyr said that he was a half-breed then. Aaron, hearing this, said that she had heard a little about them, but such children are born of a man whose body contains dragon seed. She didn't understand how a half-breed could be a child that hatched from an egg. Zephyr replied that usually, a half-breed is carried by a human woman who has fallen in love with a dragon, and only rarely there are cases when, having fallen in love with a man, the dragon itself lays an egg containing human energy, or the empty egg is fertilized forcibly by covering it with one's own energy. Aaron didn't understand what Zephyr meant when he said impregnated with her own energy, like artificially. But then suddenly the man asked Elkins if he had bled the egg. The girl was very surprised to hear this. But that didn't answer anything. Then Zephyr said that meant that it had been like that from the beginning. The egg laid by the Kunturna was an unfertilized blank. In 70 years of caring for it, there had been no reaction, so Elkins guessed what was wrong. Then he put magic and energy into the egg of his own volition, sprinkling it with blood. Zephyr is referring to the incomprehensible magical energy he received. I am at the heart of the contraption. That's how this child came to be. Zephyr asked him how far he was going to go. Was it really so necessary to create a child like that? Arin thought at that moment that those words were not for children's ears at all, and she asked the spirits if they could just muffle the sound. And at that moment she waved her hand, and the sound began to diminish. It's all thanks to the Vin Ku from the World Tree. Even without a contract, the spirits act. According to Arin's will, afterwards the girl thanked them for their help. Although the child is still small, will not be able to understand the content of the conversation, will not be able to realize that he was not a long-awaited child, that he had only been born because it was to someone's advantage. Arin thought it would be best for him to remain in the dark, at least for now. The man continued talking. Elkinus said that he was only interested in one thing. What is the likelihood that this child will awaken the abilities of the Kuntern when he grows up? But Zephyr wasn't listening to him. He asked, how many more mistakes was he going to make? The girl had put the baby back in the crib. After that, she walked over to the men and told them to stop. They both needed to calm down. Even though he was still a baby, he could still feel the atmosphere in the room. After that, she turned to Zephyr and said that it was not normal for even a half-breed to remain an infant for 10 years. It was worth observing him a little longer, for both his birth and his conception itself were extraordinary. The girl said that there were many things in the world that were unknown even to dragons. For example, one of them might be the way her father had created her mother. She thought to herself, he had bled the world's Trev himself, hadn't he? Arin said that the child should be looked after anyway, not them. Yours, not the interested party. A representative from the dragon kind, you could call it. The girl heard that baby wanted to cuddle again. Then she went over and picked him up. Elkinus, who had been watching all this, thought for a moment, and afterward he said, that's not a bad idea. And it made sense. A watcher for a half-breed. Someone who can calmly and objectively assess what's going on. He approached the girl and said that Zephyr's daughter, she would be that person. Arin was very surprised. And the guy said that they were very lucky to find a candidate who fit the description perfectly. The girl didn't understand if he really meant her. Then Elkinus said that they had the observer sorted out so they could move on. At that moment the girl thought to Zephyr to save her and do something already. Zephyr sighed heavily and said that he would probably have to stay too. It was his daughter. Elkinus was surprised and asked what he was talking about, since only his daughter would be staying at the manor. He said that he must have misunderstood him. It pissed him off that the girl had his blood in her, but due to necessity, he would allow her to live on the estate as an exception. He then approached Arin and said that he was allowing her to stay in that place, Pontiac, as a non-Onian teacher. If she didn't agree, the conversation was over. After that, he told Zephyr that whatever changes were happening to the child, their race would not see it from now on. Arin didn't realize if he really wouldn't share anything with them. But then she thought that she really wanted to give Elkinus the gift of happiness and freedom. And for some reason, she wished that this unwanted child could find her happiness as well. Arin answered nothing to his questions. Then Elkinus asked that if she didn't want to, let her leave immediately. But Arin immediately said that she agreed. She would stay at the manor and look after this child. After that, Elkinus took the girl to some room. When Arin entered, she was very surprised that she was going to live there. The girl thought the room looked too spacious for one person. Was he sure he wasn't mistaken? Carlet, when he saw the girl's concerned face, said that was right. This is the second largest room in the entire manor. The Pontia family's rule was to take care of their dear guests with all their heart. Elkinus said that it was very fortunate that a nanny for the child had finally been found. He still hadn't listened to her name and asked how he could address her. Arin hesitated for a moment. It's not like she can call her real name, so she would have to make up a new one. The girl realized that if you thought about it that way, there was one name she used to be madly fond of, and that was Adele. That's when the girl said her name was Adele, and at that moment she thought that this was the day when she could safely use it. Elkinus hesitated when he heard that, and then he said that he was Archduke Elkinus Pontiac. The child she would take care of was named Rintius Irene Pontiac. When the girl didn't answer anything, just nodded, he wished her a good rest and then left. Arin at this point was finally able to exhale and thought she could relax now. But then suddenly Carlotte approached her and apologized to the lady, but asked if she would call to ask him one question. The girl asked what was the matter. Carlotte said that she and Mr. Zephyr were not really father and daughter after all, and asked if that was true. Arin was very surprised. She didn't understand how he knew about it. After all, it hadn't even been a day. Not even a day had passed. But the girl tried to calm herself down. She thought it would be better to pretend she didn't know what he was talking about, and then everything would be all right. The girl began to stammer out some excuse, but Carlet said that from the moment of their arrival at the manor until they met His Majesty's, they didn't call each other father and daughter once. That's how he figured it out, Aaron. Now I realize that they just weren't careful enough, and I thought she'd have done the same thing if she'd been in a similar situation. Carlos said that Mr. Zephyr only used one nickname, and that was Enchantress. The only person he addresses in this manner is Lady Aaron. The man said it was really incredible. Aaron was surprised that he even realized who she was, but the girl thought that things wouldn't work that way. She'd have to come up with a good excuse for that. Then she said it was just that she, like the real Aaron, could summon a spirit, so he occasionally calls her a warlock. He and Zephyr have a lot in common, so they really are almost like father and daughter. Carlos replied indifferently that he understood then, but the girl realized that he didn't believe her words. Aaron decided that if she kept talking, she would only appear more suspicious, so she turned to Carlos and said that she had a favor to ask of him. After that, she said and requested that he should on no account tell Mr. Elkinas about it. Aaron asked him very much. Carlos replied that of course, he was not speaking to her now as the butler of the Pontiac family, but as an old man who had lived a long life and was curious about what was going on, so she could rest easy. He didn't really have a thought for spreading that information. Anywhere else, as she already knows, he is a half-elf because of the elf blood flowing in his veins. He loves the outdoors. Carlos said that when the girl arrived at the mansion, he felt an incredibly strong natural energy, so warming and peaceful that it took his breath away. Aaron was surprised and asked if it was true, and she thought that apparently the body received from the world tree could attract the elf's attention by its appearance. Carlos said that he thought she could have that effect on the master as well. Aaron questioned what he was saying, because she couldn't hear, but the man said he was just talking to himself. He then went to the door and said that he would leave her at this point, and hoped that this place would be her new home for the near future, and no inconvenience to the girl. He then asked that she would take care of His Majesty, as well as the young master, and the door closed at these words. Aaron thought Carloth put his whole soul into serving Elkinas, and he didn't seem like a bad man, as Zephyr had claimed. The image of a polite old gentleman is quite pleasing to her. But then suddenly, Zephyr came up behind her. The girl didn't expect it and said that he scared her a lot. How long has he been here? He should come in through the door, not through some secret passages. Zephyr said that Elkinas would have chased him away, though he had already done so anyway. Aaron got angry and said that of course he was just in time. What if everyone found out? What if he stole her spirit orb? Zephyr replied that if it wasn't for him, she would be dead. How could she even talk to him like that? It's true what they say. Children are a thankless task. Aaron got angry and asked how much longer he was going to talk and treat her like a child. Zephyr said that it was them and the world tree that made her. After this, they had a very long argument, and after a few hours they fell exhausted for a little respite. Zephyr said after a while that it was all good now that they were still alive. Aaron agreed with him and said that she even thought for a moment that he was really finished. After that, the girl thought that the current Elkinas was not the one she knew at all. He kills people without even blinking an eye, and also, without hesitation, attacking his comrade with whom they had once risked their lives on the battlefield. Aaron didn't realize who he was now. Then the girl turned to Zephyr and asked if she had been too naive, thinking that if she sacrificed herself, everyone could live a peaceful and happy life. Aaron said that in the end she was wrong. Her actions had not only failed to save Elkinas, but had driven him mad. Aaron grated at her words and said it was all just because of her. Zephyr, after listening to her for a while, was silent. Afterwards, he stroked her head and said, "Enchantresses, that they survived, it's only because of her. With her sacrifice, the girl saved them all. Not everyone can go for such a thing." Zephyr told the girl not to even think that the conviction and honor she was trying to defend was meaningless, for she had indeed saved Elkinas. She also had a chance to save him one more time. Aaron considered his words, then thanked Zephyr and said that thanks to him, she had cheered up a bit. After that, Aaron got up from the couch and said that indeed, instead of dwelling on the past, it would be better to think about the future. Zephyr looked at the girl and said that she came to her senses very quickly. Then he asked what she planned to do next. Aaron said that first, of course, she would watch Rinty grow up. There was also something else that needed their attention in the children's room. Some kind of strange energy was felt. Zephyr said that if that was what she was talking about, he felt it too. There was a very strange power in the air, and they would definitely need to find out where it came from. The strange energy that filled the room at first, Aaron thought that its source was the owner of that room. After all, it belonged to the offspring of the dragon demon Kunturna. But taking the child in her arms, the girl did not feel any negative energy. There was only joy and light. Elkinas definitely knew the power that was circulating through the room at that moment, but the girl didn't understand why he had left her out of it. Zephyr, after listening to the girl, asked, "Is that getting to know more about this energy while she watches it grow and develop?" Aaron said that was correct, and she also planned to put an end to it all. Zephyr didn't fully understand her. Then the girl explained that, as he had said, her death had saved many lives. But the fact that she had driven Elkinas to madness had not disappeared. She can't pretend to be unaware that even after 80 years, her friend is fixated on the past. Aaron hopes that now he can accept her death and also come to terms with it. After that he will live happily, laugh and cry next to the person he loves. Next to the person he loves. Zephyr said that in order to do that, Elkinas would somehow have to get rid of the feelings he has for her. Aaron replied that she knew it herself. What he felt for her, she needed to deal with it first. Zephyr marveled at the fact that finally the dim-witted enchantress realized how Elkinas felt about her. Aaron, after a brief pause, said that Elkinas had become attached to her. Zephyr said that the enchantress, as always, does not disappoint. Aaron was surprised and asked what was wrong. Zephyr said he certainly thought the girl should hear about it in person from the warrior, but his feelings were an unusual attachment, a bomb that came out of nowhere and never burned with the fuse ripped off. The man then asked that the enchantress consider what precedes attachment. Aaron thought for a moment. Afterwards she said, "Does he really think Elkinas really likes her?" He replied that he could probably understand how she could deny it. Aaron said it was impossible. He looked like he didn't like being around her at all from the start. When they were together, he was always looking around hoping to get away. She thought she stank once. Zephyr said that he really didn't understand why he liked her. She had even been given the resting place reserved for the Archduchess. Aaron said that Karl had chosen the room, not Elkinas. When Zephyr heard this, he was surprised and thought it was a snake. A terrible guesser. Aaron looked at him and asked what was that look, as if he thought it was impossible to live here. It was a trap prepared by Karl to set her up. Did he find out that his master was mad about her, and that's why he prepared it? Aaron asked Zephyr what they should do. "She's in danger." The boy asked, had that snake already gotten wind of her true identity? Aaron said that he had, after all, asked her to take care of his master and young master. Was he really faking it? The girl asked as Zephyr said something. The man told the enchantress that it wasn't what she was thinking, so let her calm down. And at that moment, he thought that Carla had already started pimping. But he'd overestimated the enchantress's cleverness. The result he desires will not be achieved so easily. To fool this serpent, just Zephyr must behave as the enchantress is doing now. When evening came, everything calmed down and the girl went to bed. But then suddenly, she woke up and found that it was already dawn. Aaron went to the window and opened it, letting fresh air into the room. Afterward, she wondered if Zephyr had made it back safely. The girl was worried. Had he found a place to stay? Aaron was very surprised that she fell asleep right in the middle of the conversation. After that, she began to remember where she had left off. Zephyr said that Hanaya, who took over as the head of the church, and Jamil, who took care of the peace in the underworld of the Denbane Empire. The most interesting part is that they both kept similar records of the unit that fought the Kunturna. Before she died, Hanya narrated something interesting during her confession. The confession and memoirs, which Aaron might have heard about during the day, are just such records. As soon as Jamil's memoirs were found, everyone immediately started saying something similar. Hanaya's confession represents her recorded voice messages. What Elkinas heard was apparently not revealed to the general public and was said for him alone. Jamil's memoirs describe the Kunturna campaign in great detail. Remarkably, they were divided into parts and sold on the black market for impressive sums. She herself has left the world, leaving the faction to her family such a fortune that they can live happily ever after for the rest of their lives without a second thought. And it is most likely these diaries that are being used by the fake Arins planted by the imperial family to make Elkinis believe them in some way. Arin, when she replied that Jamil was indeed unbelievable, having sold the journals herself and left an inheritance, Zephyr said she was just a spoiled brat. The girl thought Hanya was also quite suspicious. That little girl had become the straight head of the church. At that moment, Arin remembered how they had been walking through the forest, and Hanaya had turned to the enchantress, saying that she knew so much about nature. Arin that she had learned all the prayers too, hadn't she? And it's the same thing. Hania said it was no big deal. She had just been memorizing them at the convent since she was a little girl. Arin replied that she too had learned from her mom when she was little. All the time, the girl said that apparently cramming was a very important part of learning. Hania said it wasn't about her at all. It was just that the enchantress was really interesting and charming. Arin hugged the girl and told her that she thought she was the one they had, the cute and adorable one. Hanaya thanked her and they laughed loudly. Arin then said that in the future she would buy a house and plant medicinal herbs in the backyard, and asked if she would have tea with her then. Hanaya was surprised and asked, "Is she really allowed?" And she thought she only drank tea with a warrior. Arin was surprised and asked, "Is she talking about Elkinas now?" Then replied that he always drinks everything in one gulp and sits with an empty cup. But Hanya looked straight ahead and saw Jamil and Aliknas. The enchantress, when she turned around, actually saw them too and asked, "Are they really that close?" Hanya replied that apparently yes, they had been disappearing together a lot lately.